Okay, looks like it's working. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming today. We're going to be talking about interviewing skills today. I'm going to take a chance to introduce myself. My name is Danica Ryan. I am the career development specialist that works with students in visual and performing arts, liberal arts and humanities, and world languages and literature. And we're going to be talking generally about everything from before the interview to after the interview, to kind of help get you ready for that process. Amanda, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Bueller. I am the Career Coaching Graduate Assistant here at Career Services. I am getting my master's degree in Human Resource Management, so I'll be graduating this upcoming December. So we're really all excited to have you here today and kind of touch up on our interviewing skills.
And as we go along today, if you have questions about specifically, what we're talking about, you can put them in the chat. Amanda and I are going to try and keep an eye on that. But I also have some time reserved for the end for some questions. So depending on what it is, if it's kind of a general question, we may push it to the end and answer it then. But we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to cover all of these topics, and these are the things that you want to think about whenever you're preparing for your interview. You're going to want to be positive, and I know that that seems silly, but actually one of my favorite stories about one of my colleagues here at Career Services is actually before she was a career development specialist, she was working as a recruiter. And where she lived, she actually rode the subway into work every day. And so she was on the subway and this person rushed in front of her and cut her off and sat down in the seat that she was walking towards and gave her a not so nice gesture when they sat down. And she thought, well, that person's in a bad mood. They clearly needed that seat, and went on about her day. It just so happened that day that she was actually doing some pre-screening interviews for a position that they were hiring for. And whenever she got into the office, who do you think that first interviewee was? That person from the subway. Needless to say, I wouldn't have wanted to be that person in the interview. And my colleague actually had a lot of fun in that moment, seeing if the person could figure out, they were trying to figure out if she recognized them or not. And I know that's an extreme example. The truth of the matter is, I know about myself. I tend to, everyone in my family calls it, Danica time. I tend to run a little bit late. And so if they want me to be on time, this is socially, not professionally. If they want me to be on time to something socially, they make sure that they give me a 15 to 30 minute cushion. And they might even tell me that an event starts at an earlier time than it does. But because I know this about myself, I make sure that on a day of something really important, like a job interview, that I actually give myself even an hour of cushion with time. And so that's just something that I know about myself, because then I know if I'm running behind, then I'm stressed. And if I'm running late, I'm stressed and I'm not the best version of myself. And I'm likely to have a little bit more road rage on the way there, or, just be in a hurry and not be so considerate. So when you're preparing for an interview, you want to be able to talk about yourself in the best light. You want to be able to represent yourself in the best light. And so, having a good attitude about what you're going in to do, and talk about your interview, talk about your experiences, will put you in the right frame of mind. Another thing that you can do to prepare is actually studying your resume. I know that this sounds, that probably sounds strange, but actually looking at the experiences that you've put on your resume and think about specific examples from your work experiences that you can show yourself in the best light. If you know that a position you're applying for requires lots of customer service skills, for example, you're probably going to want to think about, before you go in, the times that you were the best example of your, or what the best example of your customer service is. If there was one specific time that it really made an impact with a customer, or something that you felt like you went above and beyond to take care of whatever they needed in one of your previous experiences. if you have those kind of stories in your mind before you go into the interview, you'll actually find that a lot of times the questions can kind of be molded to fit in with your experiences. Also, practice, practice, practice. We do practice interviews all the time here at Career Services. I'm saying you can practice by talking to yourself in the mirror. You can practice by talking to your roommate. You can practice on the phone with mom, dad, grandma, whoever. But get practice with your interviewing and practice saying your answers out loud, because sometimes when you say them out loud, you might actually realize, ooh, that didn't sound right, or that's not how I wanted to talk about that. You're going to do your research, which we're actually going to talk about here more in a second. And you're going to want to prepare questions for the company that you're interviewing with about the job, because this is as much an interview for you as it is for them to see if this is going to be a great new position for you. And then decide what to wear ahead of time. I stress about that on a daily basis for work. And if I were to when I make it easier on myself by laying out my outfit the night before, it's just one less thing to think about. I have students come in all the time, they try on different outfits and they take pictures of them and they bring them in and say, you know, which one do you like better? But, you know, think about that ahead of time and, you know, have that picked out. So again, that's one less thing that you're stressing about on the day of. Amanda, is there anything that you have to add to this?
No, I think that was a great overview.
Okay, so we will move on. So doing your research, this is so important because it can affect your whole interview. If you've done your research on the company, then you know what they're looking for. And you actually know what's current for them. You're showing an interest in the company. And if you go in and you haven't done that research, they may ask about something like, what have you seen recently in the media about us? Or, you know, if you don't know about the company culture or their core values or their mission, you can totally miss the mark, because you might be a great fit and there might be something that really aligns with your work experience that you miss. And that, you know, could actually put you out of the top running for a position. I always recommend that whenever you apply, create a Word document from the job description and actually save that to study before the interview, because your resume is tailored to that job description, and so should your interview. You should be thinking about what experiences you have that are going to be relevant to that job. And usually after they're to the point where they're asking people to come in and interview, the job description isn't posted online anymore. So that's actually something that you can study as well. Amanda, is there anything that you typically do when you're preparing for an interview, or you tell students to do?
Yeah, so I always recommend researching the company. It's actually also a great way to help form your questions. You can be on their company website, you could be on LinkedIn, you could be even on their Instagram, or just kind of maybe flipping through the newspaper or anything like that. And you might read something and you're a little more curious about it. And that's a great way to ask a question, because it shows that you did do your research and you want to know more about that topic.
Yeah, the questions that you ask them can actually help or hurt you as well. They can be a show of whether or not you've done your research. You want to make sure you're asking questions that can't readily be answered by their website or by any of their social media accounts. Are there any particular websites that you go to find out information about companies?
Yeah, so typically I always like to look at LinkedIn. I think it's a great professional resource and you can kind of see what the company is up to. You can see what different employees are doing. You can see current job postings as well. And then I also like to go to one of their social medias and kind of just see what they're up to, how their company culture is. I feel like maybe Instagram, you might be able to see a little bit better what their company culture is like if they're actively posting on there. And then if you wanted to go more into detail, more specifics about specific employees and positions, Glassdoor is always a great option.
Yeah, Glassdoor is kind of one of those insider secrets. Whenever someone schedules a practice interview with me, a lot of times I use Glassdoor to see people go there, and after they have an interview with a company, or even for certain types of positions, sometimes it might be a small company, but if it's a position that there's similar ones out there, people will post specific questions that they're asked in an interview. And so that can always help you kind of think about, okay, you know, these are the kinds of questions they're going to ask. And sometimes people even make suggested answers. Take those with a grain of salt, because we're going to teach you about how to actually answer the questions and what a really successful technique for that is. And that last point over there, double check your time and date and location of your interview. That's super important. And this is 100% a true story. Actually, when I got my job here at Career Services, I had the time written down different in 2 different places for my interview. And so I actually had to call a few days before and check which time was correct. And that's perfectly okay. The last thing you want is to show up late or show up on the wrong day for your interview. So make sure that you have that correct even before you hang up the phone. I have no idea how that happened with me, but I was happy that I caught it a couple of days ahead of time, because that could have been disastrous on the day of. Okay, so we talked about doing your research and scheduling a practice interview. So you can schedule a practice interview with us here at Career Services on Handshake. It's under the Career Center tab, and then you click on schedule an appointment, or you can call Career Services. And we kind of do typically 2 different types of practice interviews. We do them whenever someone has a specific interview coming up. They've gotten their resume in and they know that their interview for a position is going to be in a couple of weeks. And that's when I use the glassdoor.com and other resources to have some, tailored questions specific for the industry or specific for that company. But also the other type that we do is just a general practice. We have some practice questions on our website, and I'm going to include some links here later on to find some of our resources, but we have some general questions that can kind of help prepare you for just answering questions and talking to somebody new. Say you're really comfortable with in-person interviews, but you've never done one on Zoom. You might want to schedule a practice Zoom interview just so that you get familiar with all of the different ins and outs of Zoom. You're all on Zoom right now, so that's great. But it might be a platform you're not familiar with, and you might want to try, online to see how that goes. And then finding out the type of interview actually kind of leads me into the next slide. So I'm not going to say too much about that. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Amanda?
I would just say, along with, with a platform that you might not be familiar with, I know when I had my interview for my internship last year, they used a platform that I was not only familiar with, but I had to download to my laptop. So I was really happy that I went on beforehand and I looked at that, because that download time took a good chunk of time. So if I had to be late to my interview because of that, I probably wouldn't have had the same internship this past summer.
And then I actually saw the little note bubble up in the top right corner. And the reason we put that there is actually be aware of where you are whenever you're taking a potential call that might be for an interview. If you're in the middle of somewhere that's really loud, or there's loud music playing, or there's people screaming and yelling, it might not give the best impression. And if you remember that friend that I told you that used to be a recruiter, she actually said if there was someone she was planning to interview, if she heard their voicemail and their voicemail was unprofessional, she actually would change her mind and interview someone that was an alternate. So make yourself, as you're starting to apply and everything like that, these are all of the little details that can, make it or break it. So if it's a phone number that you don't know, or you're not able to answer somewhere quiet, don't feel the pressure that you have to answer it right then. Actually, another personal story about whenever I got this job, or whenever I got the interview for the job that I have right now, I got the phone call for the interview actually on a day when I was homesick and I had laryngitis. And I saw that they were calling. I was like, oh, I can't answer right now. I was laying on the couch and not feeling great. And so I went and made myself a cup of tea and tried to get my voice back so I could sound a little bit more professional on the phone before I called back. And so that is perfectly okay to do. That's why voicemail was invented. Don't sweat that, and get somewhere wherever you can be comfortable and where you can pay 100% of your attention so that you write down the correct time for your interview. So this is that last bullet from the last slide, is the different types of interviews. Traditional phone, Skype, Zoom, those ones are, commonly known. One that I want to speak about a little bit is actually a case interview. This one has been up and coming. They've been utilizing this a lot more. And it's actually where you're presented with a problem that you need to solve or a case. And at times, if you're in a group interview, and it's a teamwork environment, they can assign you the case ahead of time, but then you have to come and work with the other interviewees on resolving the issue, whatever it is. They want to, and that one is more of they want to see how you work with the other people and how you problem solve and everything like that. So that's one that's not commonly known. And then something that's similar to a group is also a panel. I've helped a few students recently that they find out before that there's going to be a panel. So they're one person and they go in and sit and they talk to a line of 5 to 10 people that are all going to be interviewing them. That one can certainly be intimidating. And then also a lunch or coffee interview, dinner interview, that we have a whole separate presentation about those types of settings. But if you know that that's going to be the setting, set up an appointment with one of us, and we can do our best to kind of simulate that environment. We won't take you out to lunch or anything, but we can talk about these are the things you'll do, at this time, or this is how you can order from the menu. Like I said, that's a whole separate presentation, but being able to find out that information will actually help you know how to prepare. Anything I missed, Amanda?
I think you nailed it.
Okay. What type of interviews have you had over the past couple of years?
So I would say most of my interviews, they've been like a two-part interview, and they always typically have started off with a phone interview. Pre-COVID, I always went to interviews in person, the traditional interview. And then most recently, they've really just been Skype or Zoom or WebEx, Teams. But there have been some situations where I have been in a group setting, at least for some parts of the interview. So I just think the best way to kind of help prepare yourself is to practice. Grab those roommates, grab your mom and dad, offer to buy them Starbucks or something to help you practice. But that's the best way kind of to help prepare yourself for the real thing, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And then there's actually another pre-screener type that you reminded me of. And in our office, we use Jobma, but it's actually a platform where there are just kind of answer prompts, and you have a set amount of time to give an answer, and that's it. Sometimes if they're generous, you'll have more than one opportunity to answer it. But sometimes if they're not so generous, then you have that one and done, and that's your chance to answer it. And it's used more as a screener. I've helped some students with that, and that's another opportunity that we have, is we can actually set up a practice interview that way, where you can get familiar with answering questions and see, some of your nonverbal behaviors on camera and things like that, just to, get an idea for that. So that's another one I wanted to mention. Okay, so dressing professionally, make sure, I'm going to preface this with make sure you know your industry, because and actually, as a result of the post-COVID world, we're still in the midst of it, but I guess I should say, like the post-lockdown of last year, a lot of companies have really lightened up on their dress code, so that's something to be aware of. And also knowing where your interview is going to be, or what type, depending on where you're working. Like there's several engineering positions, for example, that if your interview, you're actually going to be going out to a work site. If you show up in a full suit, you're not actually going to be able to get out on the work site and see everything. It's going to show, it can look like you don't have a good understanding of what the job would actually be. I can tell you an example of my husband, and this is completely non-traditional, but he is an accountant. And they actually told him and most accountants, it's full suits all day, every day. But the office that he works in, they actually work with a lot of contractors and things like that. And so they actually told him, and this was very generous, don't wear a suit to your interview. If you wear a suit, you won't get the job. Because we don't wear suits. We're not a suits kind of place, which, is awesome. He didn't have to spend a bunch of money on that. But making sure that you kind of have that understanding about what's normal for your industry. But when all else fails, dress conservatively. You don't want anything that's too much of a distraction. Most of the time, having a suit is going to be safe. And you don't, like I said, anything distracting. So any, really loud jewelry or, anything like that, would distract you even while you're trying to talk. If you talk with your hands a lot, that's something that I've even heard. I used to work as a school counselor, and one of my principals used to say that if women had really noisy bracelets, it drove him crazy. And so, just being cognizant of that, you don't want anything that's going to distract from the great things that you're saying. Did I miss anything?
I would just throw into if you're worried about a lack of professional clothing or anything like that, WVU has partnered with JCPenney at the Morgantown Mall. And once a semester, we do a JCPenney suit up event where there's a shuttle bus everyone can take if you don't have a car. And you do get a discount on all of those professional clothes. So if you're looking for something like that in the future, I would just say that's a great option, especially because they're so generous to give us a discount and they closed the store off for us, so it's just WV students along with career service specialists. So if you even have a question, we're all there to answer any type of interview outfit questions.
And I just put the link to the section on our website for Dress to Impress. There's actually some pictures on there of what's considered business professional, what's considered business casual, and kind of everything in between with some descriptions underneath. If you ever have any doubt, take a look at our website for some more information. Okay, so now we've kind of gotten outfit ready, done our research, and then to the last part, what you're going to want to have ready before you're actually going to the interview. Always have questions ready. It's perfectly acceptable to actually have them written down. I recommend it all the time, actually, because if when you get in an interview and you're nervous, it just can all fly out of your head. And as you get to talking, you can forget what you had planned to ask. So go in ahead of time with about 3 to 5 questions written down. And whenever they get to that point in the interview, say, I actually have some written down in my Padfolio. Do you mind if I, get them out to ask you? And really think about the questions that you want to ask. Think about what you want to know about the day-to-day work environment, what you want to know about this job, because like I said earlier, this is as much a interview for you as it is for them. These are some examples, but also finding out, I tend to be a type A planner. So I'll say for me personally, I always like to find out what the timeline is, so that I can have those expectations of, okay, when will I know if I've gotten this position, or when do I know if, like, okay, I need to move on and think about what my next options are. That's one that's personally on the list for me every time. But I do have to say, save any questions about your salary and benefits for later. You don't want to start to have that conversation, which actually Chala did a wonderful presentation yesterday about that. But you want to save the salary and negotiation until you've actually had a formal offer. So sometimes, and Amanda, you can talk about this much better than I can, but sometimes early on, they may ask for a salary range, and they just want, that's like a human resources thing. That's why I said Amanda can talk about it much better. But you can do your research about what a range would be. Websites like ONET and salary.com can even help you with that, so that rather than giving a specific number, you can say, well, based on my research in this field and in this area, someone who is starting out makes between this much and this much. And that's something that I'd like to talk, be willing to talk about, more when there's a formal offer. I know Amanda can add to that one.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Save salary and benefits all for later when there's an offer. You don't want to look too eager. It might not be the most appropriate question to ask on like an initial interview. I know for me, one of the questions that I typically ask across the board is, what does your typical day look like? How, if it's like with a hiring manager or someone that I could have the potential of working with, what's the communication? What's that like? How would I be working with you? And then I always like to throw in one of those personalized questions that, I saw off of their website or on their LinkedIn. I ask about something that's going on, because not only are you asking about, what a typical day would look like for you in the future and how you can help benefit that organization. But it shows that you're eager and you want to learn more about their company culture, what they're getting involved with currently, what are the plans for the future. So I would just always keep those questions in the back of your mind. I know personally, I have just a Google Doc of questions to ask interviewers that are a little more baseline that I always have in case, like Danica said, you might get nervous, you might forget. Questions are typically at the end of the interview, so you might not be thinking about it. You've just probably gotten a lot of information right off the bat. But yeah, definitely keep those questions ready and always add to it and do your research.
Okay. Okay, so we're coming back to the be positive thing. And this is for during the interview. So there are some questions, it's kind of evil, but there are some questions out there that are designed to pull you to a negative side. And a lot of times they're formatted in, tell me about the job position that was your least favorite job, or what's another one, Amanda? We were talking about this yesterday when we were preparing, and I'm drawing a blank.
The conflict management.
Yes, tell me about a time you had a conflict, or tell me about a time that you and a peer disagreed, and what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to get sucked into the gossipy, or if it's something that's still thinking about what you would answer to those questions ahead of time is really important. If it's something that you still have, that's still emotionally charged for you, that you still have really negative feelings about, that might not be the example that you want to use, because that will come through. And so you really, whenever employers ask that, it can draw you over to a negative side, but what they really want to see is how you solve problems, because conflict is going to come up in the workplace. There are going to be problems. It's not going to all be sunshine and butterflies. And so they want to see how you deal with those things whenever they come up. And if it's in a customer service environment, again, some their customers are not always happy. And so knowing that you know how to deal with an unhappy customer is a really good thing. Body language, and that can be hard on a platform like this. But paying attention to, are you sitting like this, far away from somebody? Are you making good eye contact? And actually there's a lot about like having an open body stance that shows that you're open, and that can make somebody feel like, okay, this person's really a lot more interested. But if you're, leaned away, looking around, checking your watch, you might send a message that you're not as interested in this position as you might actually be. So being aware of even things that you tend to do whenever you're nervous can be helpful as well. And checking for contact information. So after the interview's over, make sure you find out, remember the names of everyone you interviewed with and their contact information. Usually that's an email address, but that is, at least anymore it is, but that is for you to send out a thank you email after. But have I missed anything else for kind of the overview of during the interview?
I would just add that that's why it's so important to practice, especially with your body language. If you come to career services or you practice with your roommate, they'll be able to tell you, what you should work on, what you should be mindful of in the future. So that's why we always stress that it's just so important to practice these interviews.
Mm-hmm. And the more comfortable you are, the better it'll go. You're always going to be nervous in an interview. That's just kind of the natural flow of it, but that's just the natural way. But if you've practiced it enough, then you kind of have a lot of the answers, and a lot of things that you fall back on will just kind of be second nature. So now we're diving into the good stuff, the interview questions. And so there are general questions that people will ask that are like, why did you choose WVU? And what are your personal strengths and weaknesses? And then there's also questions that are behavior based. And those are the ones that start out with something like, describe a time when, or give me an example of a time when. And we're going to talk about those here in a second. But so there's the tell me about yourself question. That one is, I think, the most common one. I ask it in every single practice interview that I do. And what that is that's a great cue to use your elevator pitch. And if you haven't prepared an elevator pitch, there's also information on that on our website, but that's definitely something you would want to work on in a practice interview with one of us. Usually you talk about your name, your major, what you've studied while you were at WVU, an internship that you've had, and why you think that you would be, the part that I add then for an interview, why you think that your experiences would make you a good fit for that company. Anything to add to that one, Amanda?
I think that was perfect.
Okay. You always want to relate it back to the company that you're interviewing with, your school, your own experiences, and you want to tie it back to the company. That's kind of going to be like the bow, or that's what I say, the bow on the package of every single answer is tying it back to the company that you're interviewing for, and showing how what your experiences are will be related to them. Let's see here. So behavior-based questions. That's where you think about those situations where you have kind of the best examples of yourself. A lot of times that could be, it's depending on your industry, but it can be, great examples of communication skills or customer service or leadership. But thinking about when you have really good concrete examples, it kind of goes the opposite of the way natural like storytelling goes. If you're telling a good story to friends, you want to build up the anticipation, maybe by talking a little bit vague at first. You actually don't want to do that in an interview. You want to talk as specific as you can about this, about the story. I'm saying as a story, but about the situation, to really help them get an idea of what skills you utilized on the job. Oops, I keep doing that. Let's see, Amanda, we thought that it would be more engaging for you all to kind of see an example of a good elevator pitch or an answer to the tell me about yourself question. Do you have any tips about any of the other behavioral based or anything like that before I put you on the spot, Amanda?
I would just say with behavioral based, I always personally like to look at my resume and try to find a question that kind of aligns with some type of work experience. Like, oh, during my retail experience, I could think of a good time where X, Y, and Z happened. Your resume is there to help you. It almost can help guide you before that interview. So definitely take advantage of that.
Mhm. That's one of the best tips I had. And even if you have that phone screener interview, that's one of the best tips I had from a professor actually was to have my resume sitting right in front of me. They can't see it on the phone interview. And it's just a good reminder of what they're looking at, but also for you, oh yeah, I had this job that was a really great fit. It's kind of good to have there as a safety net for those phone screeners as well. Okay, so Amanda, can you give me an example of, can you tell me about yourself?
Of course. So hi everyone, my name is Amanda. I'm currently a second year master's student at West Virginia University, where I'm getting my degree in human resource management. During our time, some courses we've covered are benefits, compensation, talent acquisition, performance management, training and development, and one of my personal favorites was data analytics. Also, with the courses that we've had, I've also had an internship for HR this past summer where I interned with Sierra Nevada Corporation, who specializes in aerospace and defense. So I believe all those kind of knowledge-based traits that I learned in the classroom, along with the personal experiences that I gained over the summer, would be a great fit for this position.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, so there's one question Amanda and I agreed on unanimously, which it was just the two of us, but we agreed wholeheartedly that would be good for you all to hear that it's kind of one of the traps. Everybody seems to hate this question, but it is also the one that when answered correctly can really speak volumes. And that is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Amanda, do you want to give us maybe an example of what not to do for that one? Can I put you on the spot for that?
Of course. So, kind of just right off the bat, you're going to want to make sure that you just don't want to give some traits and then not elaborate on anything like that. So, if I said, oh, I have great communication skills, that's it. then no one needs to know anything else about it. That's probably not great. And for your weaknesses, this is definitely the trap part of the question. I've definitely fallen for it in the past. The trap is that you're going to want to give a weakness that's maybe not necessarily a true weakness. You're not going to want to say things like, oh, you procrastinate, you're bad at time management, which is what I said, which is definitely a trap. You don't want to say that you don't like leadership opportunities or things like that. You're going to want to say something more of like, oh, I take on a lot of responsibilities, or I have a hard time saying no, or I look too closely into detail, something that you can kind of turn around to be a positive.
Mhm. And there was a big trend whenever I was graduating from college a few years ago, to actually use that, oh, my weakness, I'm a perfectionist. And the thing of it is that employers want to hear, I mean, nobody's perfect. The important part of that question and what I always look for is, how are you working on your weakness? What have you been doing to improve on it? And it shows that self-awareness, but also that you're willing to grow and you're willing to learn. And you make mistakes, and that's okay. You're going to figure out how to deal with it, and you're going to work on it. And so those are the things that I tell students all the time is, be honest. A recruiter is going to be able, or an interviewer, anyone interviewing you is going to be able to tell if your answers are genuine or not. And that's what's going to get you, that's what's going to move you on more than if you try to give the answer that you think that they want to hear. And there were definitely some of those canned answers, like I said, whenever I was graduating, that like quickly recruiters got, they became privy to, and they, kind of roll their eyes like, oh, this answer again. And you definitely don't want to fall for that. So with those behavior-based questions a little bit more, we actually use something called the STAR technique, and it stands for situation, task, action you took, and results you achieved. So the situation and task kind of go together. You're going to start out your example with kind of setting up the scene. What was the situation? What was the problem that you had to solve, or what exactly was going on? And if you kind of imagine it like a triangle, actually, you'll spend the least amount of time talking about that situation or task. You'll spend a medium amount of time talking about the action that you took, but then you're going to actually spend the most time talking about the results. And because that's, if you think about it from an employer's point of view, they want to know what your results were. And then that bow that I mentioned before that kind of ties it all together is, okay, you got these results. This is how you dealt with this. Now, how can you do that for my company? Or how do you see that carrying over? That kind of like ties everything all together. And so getting to practice answering questions using that STAR technique is definitely very important. And actually, Amanda prepared an example for us. And so I want you all to be able to see the effectiveness. And so the first time she answers this question, she's actually going to answer it without the STAR technique. And then the second time she's actually going to use it. So the question I have for you, Amanda, is give me an example of a time that you had to deal with a conflict at work.
Yeah, so I was the assistant manager at a retail store called J. Crew on Long Island. And so we had this new employee to our store who had been transferred from a different store, and she was just not getting what we were trying to do. I guess her store did it differently. I don't really know. It wasn't great. And so I kept on trying to teach her and teach her and teach her, but she was just not getting the hang of it. And, pretty much what just had to happen was we had to let her do her own thing. It just didn't really work out. We would have to go back and redo what she did. But overall, we kind of just dealt with it.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to give it a go using the STAR technique. Okay. So Amanda, can you give me an example of a time that you had to deal with a conflict at work?
Yeah, sure. So when I was the assistant manager at J. Crew, we had this employee who was transferred from a different store, and previously their store ran a little differently than ours. They had some different techniques that we weren't exactly used to, and vice versa, that she wasn't exactly aware of what we did as well. So we saw the problem initially, and I got together with the other assistant managers, and we spoke about different potential actions we could take to help resolve the problem. And so we spoke with her. we kind of just explained that this isn't necessarily how we do it at our store, and that it was okay that she had learned it a different way. There are definitely growing pains with coming into a new store. So what we did was we implemented a training for her, and each day a different assistant manager would kind of just go over with her, see what she learned, new techniques. And over the course of maybe about a month, she got the hang of it, of how we had been running it at our store. And currently, that training program is still being implemented today.
Okay. So something that Amanda did actually that wasn't part of the plan, but it's awesome, is the first one, I don't know if you all noticed, kind of took that negative turn, kind of had like a negative overall tone to it. But the way that she phrased things whenever she went through the STAR technique actually took on more of a positive, no blaming, no shaming, nobody's fault. It was, this was the problem and this is how we went about solving it. And so remembering to use the STAR technique will actually, I find that a lot of students, whenever they practice interviewing, say that they feel like they get caught up and they get stuck rambling, or they kind of end up in a circle and they don't know how to end it. So if you use the STAR technique, then that can help you actually, know what to do next. If you're going through those steps in your mind, then it helps to kind of keep you on track and keep you focused and be able to wrap it up. Anything to add, Amanda?
No, that was about it.
Okay, so now we're to the end of the interview. So remember, whenever I mentioned getting the contact information, sometimes that means everybody's business cards. If it's online, they may send you an email afterwards with everyone's contact information, but you want to make sure that you get at least one person's contact information, but everybody's names. And within 24 hours of the interview, you actually want to send a thank you email. And think about specific things about the interview that stood out to you, or specific things about the company that appealed to you. And believe me when I say that it really makes an impact to send that. Not everybody sends the thank you email, despite the fact that everybody I meet, I tell them to do that. Not everyone does. And so that can really make a big difference and help you stand out from others. And I can tell you from being in the position where, I have interviewed to hire some people. Whenever we get that interview, it's always like, oh, that's really nice. It's just a good, and it doesn't have to be anything long or lengthy. It can just be, a thank you. I really enjoyed sitting down and talking to you. We have some samples on our website, by the way. And then mentioning anything, I really enjoyed getting to learn more about, this aspect of your company and how things work. And then, you can actually writing a letter is almost unheard of. That can always be a really nice touch too. But because, physical mail takes a little longer to arrive, sending an email within 24 hours kind of gets you back to the top of their minds. The other thing is, if they give you directions, okay, this is great. Now we need you to go submit this on this website by this deadline. Make sure you do that. And make sure you do what you say you're going to do and follow up. And then really think about the interview and the things that you learned about, whether or not it's going to be the right fit for you. And what the next steps for you would be, if it is. Anything else, Amanda, to add?
I would just say that sending a thank you really doesn't hurt you in any way. It can really only help you. So if you're really passionate about a job, or you made a really good connection during that interview, you can definitely throw in that personal touch. And I'm sure that most interviewers would definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
Mhm. And so this is the part where we've got some questions, or we have the opening for questions. I'm actually going to end the slideshow and stop sharing my screen so that I can copy and paste those links into the chat for you. But if anybody has any questions, Amanda and I are here to answer them. You can ask either one of us.